glands, sympathetically, what do your tear glands do when you're in fight or flight mode? They decrease, they stop, they inhibit. You get dry eyes when you're nervous. And if you think about it, if you're in a fight, the last thing you want to do is have tears running down your face. You're trying to see someone to kill them, right? It's not going to help you.
So why do babies cry when they get scared?
That's
because they're babies?
Yeah, that's actually different. When you're watching the movie, the rom-com movie, and you're weeping like a stuck, whatever, that's me. It's because you're relaxed enough to cry. People get into car wrecks and they cry 3 hours after they get home, not after the wreck, right? Because they're in stress mode. Stress with crying does not help me stay alive. Erector pili, goosebumpers. When do you get goosebumps? Sympathetic, right? You get goosebumps when you're scared. You should not be having them normal, less, reduced when you're not scared. Blood vessels, the skin. When you're scared, your blood vessels decrease. The skin constrict. Scared white as a ghost, white as a sheet. Right? If you think about it, if I'm in a fight, I don't want blood at my skin because you'll hurt me and I'll bleed. So I want the blood to go where it's important, which is the core of the body. So you're going to dilate or increase them when you're in parasympathetic mode. Yes?
What about when you get embarrassed?
That's subtly different. That's overriding this.
Okay.
So the capillaries will work. Skeletal muscles. If I'm in a fight, I want more blood. So I'm going to increase the blood because I have to fight you or win, right? Constriction, normal, less when I'm in parasympathetic mode. Lungs. If I were a lung blood vessel, I would want to get more. To more air, for more muscle, for more fight. If I am on the couch, I'm not breathing very well, I don't need that. Constrict, normal, reduced. Digestive organs. Blood to my digestive organs sympathetically would be decreasing. Because if you're eating while being attacked, you're a strange person. Rest and digest. So everything that has to do with food is going to be in this column. Resting and digesting. How about your kidneys when you're in sympathetic mode? They turn off. Peeing in the middle of a fight is a bad idea, right? It really is.
It could be a really great idea, though.
It might be, but not
evolution.
away. Brain. You tend to increase blood flow to your brain when you're stressed. You decrease. That's different than this. That's not actually this. That's the pee you had before you entered sympathetic, not during sympathetic mode. Okay, we did the heart. Airway. Sympathetic airway should do what? Open, increase, dilate, get bigger. Because I want more air to feed more muscle to kill you. I'm going to constrict or do less when I'm impaired. That's why you're snoring on the couch when you're sleeping. Digestive activity. So sympathetic should make it go down, right? That's the nausea, the butterflies, that knot in your stomach when you're nervous is because your digestive organs are shutting down. I need them to be resting and digesting if I want my digestive organs to work. Right? That's why I throw up before every class. Digestive glands. Up or down in sympathetic mode? Down. They're going to be down because I do not digest. They go up when I'm in rest and digest. Right? So the eating doesn't keep me alive in a fight. So therefore I'm going to turn off and turn on when I'm relaxed. Make sense? So we think through those. It makes some sense. Let's do liver and the other couple here.
Decrease.
Where's liver? Let's go up to liver. What does your liver do in a fight? That's a bad joke. Breaks down glycogen. Okay, so remind me from Biology 112 what glycogen was. Stored sugar. It releases sugar. Why would you want sugar? Energy for a fight. So I'm going to release and break down the glycogen. So therefore, when I'm resting and digesting, I'll be storing the glycogen. I'll be forming glycogen. I'll be storing more sugar because I'm eating and storing the sugar. Make sense? Skeletal muscles. What do you think they do in fight or flight mode? Contract harder or weaker? Harder. They're stronger. They get more contractility is a fancy word. When you're resting and digesting, they should be normal, less strong, decreased, weaker. Adipose. What does your fat do in a fight? It breaks down. Why would you want to break down fat? What's it for? Energy. So if I'm in stress, I'm going to break down my fat. Do not use this as a diet plan. The stress will break down fat because you're trying to keep yourself alive to fight. then you're going to add fat. You're going to store fat because you're just sitting there and eating, right? Rest and digest. Right? Kidney function goes down. Because again, I'm not going to stop the fight to pee. If I don't live through the fight, it doesn't matter anyway. It's going to be normal or increased when I'm parasympathetic. Ding. Is that a verb? Bladder is going to stay tight, stay closed. You know this. Have you ever tried to pee when the bathroom's like really quiet? It's really hard to make the pee come out when people are listening. You do that? Or you're peeing in the cup at work and someone has to watch you. You can't because you're stressed out. The bladder won't work because if I'm going to fight, I don't want to stop the pee. So you can relax the bladder when you're relaxed. You pee when you're comfortable. Right? These ones are fun. Reproductive organs. Sympathetic reproductive organs. No, orgasm. That's usually not a decrease for most people. Okay? Arousal is parasympathetic. We call this the wine and candle effect. It takes being relaxed to get turned on. And then as you get more turned on, you get more fight or flight. So let's go through it. When you get more turned on, what does your heart rate do? Goes up. What's your breathing do? Goes up. So to your body, if I want your heart to go faster, I have to shift you to the sympathetic side. So it isn't as though you only do this when you're in a fight. You do it anytime you want your body to do these things. Right? But if you're already stressed, you can't get turned on. So your final, you probably will not be having these. Right? Because you come in stressed, you didn't go there. Make sense? Hopefully not. If you get turned on your final, come talk to me after class. We'll have a chat, right? They have names for that. To show you I'm not making this up much, which is this one. So we're going to do a little comparison here of the system. So this is sympathetic. What's his heart doing? Beating fast. I'm in a fight. What are his pupils doing? Getting big. Right? I can't. And that's, gee whiz, you don't make boogers when you're scared. Yeah. No spit, scared spitless, ever hear that one? Am I the only one? All right. So anything that's not required to keep fighting you and running away turns off, right? That's, piloerection means hair up, that's the goosebumps, right? Big lungs, big muscles, right? And so this is rest and digesting, right? Everything's going to be reversed. So the key idea here is that they're the opposites. So if I remember one of them, the other one's the reverse. So my heart's going to slow down. My digestion's going to go up. My pupils are going to get smaller. My lungs are going to get smaller, right? So I'm eating and sleeping, and therefore these organs turn on and those ones turn off. Make sense? So you have to know what each organ would do in these systems. If you remember one, remember the other one's the opposite. That's what you're doing. You're simply shifting from one option to the other. Turn on, turn it off. Make it go up, make it go down. Make sense? Okay, but now there's a whole other bunch of stuff we have to learn about this system besides that. So let me show you some pictures of the autonomic nervous system. And the first thing we have to do is start looking at how they're anatomically different from each other. There's going to be a big chart you're going to have to memorize, thou shalt know, soon. But first we're going to start with this picture here. This is showing the autonomic nervous system, the talking to my body with the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions, and it's showing the pathways of information from basically those divisions to my organs. The organs are on this side. Let's review what organs we have. So what organs do we talk about? Those. So things I don't normally control. Smooth muscles, glands, my heart, my lungs, things I don't have conscious control of. So we're going to talk to them either fight or flighty, or rest and digesty, to use science talk. Right? So what you're going to have to do is understand these differences that are in this picture, and I'm going to put them on the board. But basically there's about 5 things different between these two systems as you go down these categories. So we're going to make a chart on the board that thou shalt know. Go down for it. We're going to go line by line through them. All right, so we're going to do sympathetic on one side of the board here and parasympathetic on the other side. So we'll do sympathetic here, parasympathetic over here. Split your paper down the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to have different categories of things that we're looking at. Category 1, the first thing we're looking at is the location of the nerves. So where on my body are these nerves located, the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nerves? It's the first difference you have to know. So I'm going to show you a picture. That was not the one I just showed you. It's a different one. Okay. I got excited in other classes, so ignore the red dots right now. Okay, this is showing the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems side by side with your spinal cord down the middle. I need therapy with these lights. I really don't understand them. Okay. So these are the sympathetic and parasympathetic wires that are going from my CNS to my organs. And they actually come out of different parts of my spine. So if we look at the top, the sympathetic's on the right in this case, parasympathetic's on the left. If you look at where the neurons arise, some come out of my brain, some come out of my back, my spinal cord, and there's a difference in which system comes out where. So we're going to look at the sympathetic first. We look at the sympathetic, which is on the right-hand side. It starts in T and goes down to L. So the wires come out of my thoracic and lumbar spines, and that's a unique part of it. So let's put that over here. So sympathetic, we call that the thoracolumbar system because the nerves come out of the thorax and lumbar spines. So thoracolumbar system. Make sense? Parasympathetic. Look at this picture. Where do the parasympathetics come from? Let's find out. They're on the left. Where do they come from? Brainstem and the sacrum. So how can we say that in doctor speak? Craniosacral is how we say that. So the parasympathetic is called the craniosacral system. The neurons come out of different parts of your spinal cord. They go to the same places, but they origin in different spots. So far so good? Okay. Now, we get the harder one now. The length of the neurons, of the nerves. Okay. This requires you to remember what you learned in 231. Since now you remember what you learned in 231, let's go through it again. Can someone tell me what this little shape of a mouse is? What is that representing in terms of neurons? Close. There's a space there. Remember what you call the space?
The synapse?
Synapse. Very good. Synaptic cleft, synaptic gap. So this is representing synapses between neurons. So if you look at the green, I have a neuron before the synapse, right here. I have a neuron after the synapse. You with me? So there's always two. There's one before and one after the synapse. So if I go to this side here, I have the same thing. There's a neuron before the synapse and one after. Before, after. There's always two neurons in either system. The difference is their lengths change. So if you go back to my sympathetic, you'll notice how, on this picture, right, this neuron and this neuron look like they're different lengths. This neuron and this neuron look like they're different lengths. So you have two neurons, but they vary in how long they are. Okay? So what I'm going to do is show you a different picture of that, diagrammatically, like this. So the sympathetic is the top. Let's ignore this middle one. And the parasympathetic is the bottom. So I want you to look and find the two neurons. Can you find two neurons in the top picture? Yes. So we have this neuron. That's a synapse. We have this neuron. So we give those neurons names. We call this one a preganglionic fiber because the ganglion is the synapse. What do you think we call the one after the synapse? Postganglionic fiber. So you have a pre and a post. Look here. Preganglionic neuron, postganglionic neuron. There's always two. But the lengths change. Look at the top picture. Compare the two lengths. Which one's the longer and which one's the shorter? Let's see. Okay, so this one looks shorter than this one. So in the sympathetic system, you have a long pre-ganglionic fiber, a long pre-wire. So the long one is the first, I'm sorry, no, hold on. Short, I did it backward, I said it right, did I? Short, sorry, try that again. Short pre-ganglionic fiber and a long post-ganglionic fiber. So the first one is short, the second one is longer, comparatively. And the ganglion simply means the synapse, the grouping, a gang. So my first wire is short, my second wire is long. Parasympathetic, tell me what I'm going to write here, hopefully correctly this time. A long pre and a short post. So you have the same two wires, there's always two, but their sizes, their lengths change. So the parasympathetic system, the long one is the first, the shorter one's the second. Long name, long pre. Parasympathetic, long pre. Make sense? So they differ by where they are and the lengths. Now we'll add the next harder part. Neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters vary between these neurons. All right. 231 again. Take a look at the neurons. Neurotransmitters, right? Between neurons, synapses. So we're going to look at the sympathetic system. What neuron is used, what neurotransmitter is first? Acetylcholine. So in the sympathetic system, you use acetylcholine. That's between the pre and the post. So you use ACH, acetylcholine, is the neurotransmitter between the first neuron and the second. But wait, you're not done yet. There's another neurotransmitter you use. Look on the right of the screen. There's a neurotransmitter between the post and the organ. What neurotransmitter is used sympathetically? Norepinephrine. So you're going to use norepinephrine. That's between the post and the organ you're talking to. So you have two neurotransmitters, ACH and NE, acetylcholine and norepinephrine. First one between the first two neurons, and the second one is after the neuron, between the neuron and the organ. Does that make sense? Okay, in the parasympathetic system, we have two neurons, we have two neurotransmitters. Take a look at them. What do you notice about the parasympathetic system? They're the same, acetylcholine. So you have ACH for both. So that's between the pre and the post, and the post to organ. So the parasympathetic system always uses acetylcholine no matter where. Sympathetic system uses acetylcholine first and norepinephrine second. That makes sense? Okay, I'm going to show you an animation of this part so far before we move on. Here we go.
The autonomic nervous system, or ANS, responds to unconsciously perceived visceral sensations. The control center for the ANS is primarily the hypothalamus, but parts of the spinal cord may also be involved. The output of the ANS results in inhibition or excitation of effector organs, including smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands, and adipose tissue.
So if you think about it, visceral sensations and emotions, that's my limbic system again. So when I get all stressed out, I'm going to go into sympathetic mode. That tells this ANS system to turn on some organs and turn off others. So I'm going to do two kinds of things to all those involuntary organs. All right? Yeah.
The ANS is composed of two pathways, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, both of which regulate the function of many effectors. The regulation of a single effector by both sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions is called dual innervation. Dual innervation will balance an autonomic effector's function.
Okay, so think about that. Why would you need both systems to each organ? What would happen if you could only sympathetic your heart? What would it do?
Stop.
It would just keep getting faster and faster, right? So your car has an accelerator and a brake because you need to be able to speed up and slow down. So you need both systems for every organ because they're opposites. So I need to speed up my heart, I need something to turn off my heart. Remember the first day class with that negative feedback stuff? That's the logic. I need something to bring it down, something to bring it up. So for each organ, you have two different ways you can tell it to go, faster, slower, more or less. But that's going to be the two divisions. So each organ would be innervated by both systems for the most part. Okay? Okay, try.
The motor pathways of the autonomic nervous system differ from the somatic nervous system in several ways. The number of motor neurons for each pathway, the presence of ganglia, and the number and type of neurotransmitters.
That's what your chart is. Here we go. Next.
In the somatic nervous system, a single motor neuron excites the effector, a skeletal muscle. In the autonomic nervous system, the motor pathway consists of two motor neurons, one following the other, carrying an action potential to the effector. The first neuron in an autonomic pathway, the preganglionic neuron, is a myelinated neuron. This first neuron synapses with the cell body of a second, non-myelinated postganglionic neuron at an autonomic ganglion.
So ganglion just means grouping up. So the first one and the second one grouped together. That's the ganglion. We have a one and the other. You always have two, no matter what system you're in. Okay. There are always two.
In autonomic ganglia, the neurotransmitter acetylcholine is released via exocytosis from the preganglionic neuron. Diffusing across the synaptic cleft, it generates an action potential on the postganglionic neuron. The action potential then continues to travel along the axon of the postganglionic neuron towards the effector.
So both use acetylcholine.
Ganglia of the parasympathetic division are close to or within the effector organs. Because the preganglionic motor neurons come from 4 cranial nerves and the sacral segments of the spinal cord, this division is also called the craniosacral division. In a parasympathetic ganglion, there are only a few postganglionic neurons. This pattern often provides stimulation to only one effector. Ganglia of the sympathetic ANS are near the spinal cord or major abdominal arteries. Since the preganglionic motor neurons come from the thoracic and lumbar segments of the spinal cord, this division is also called the thoracolumbar division. In a sympathetic ganglion, there are many postganglionic neurons. This pattern often provides stimulation to many effectors. The way an autonomic neuron is classified depends on the type of neurotransmitter that is released into a synapse. Acetylcholine is released by cholinergic neurons and is quickly removed from the synapse by the enzyme acetylcholinesterase.
Wow, remember that from last term? Good. Now we have some language you have to know, especially if you're going to be an EMT or something like that. They use some language different from this. You're going to learn it anyway, because you're a doctor. So, over here with the sympathetic system again. Parasympathetic system again. So there's synonyms you can use for some of these words. So the parasympathetic system is sometimes called the cholinergic system. Why do you think we call it the cholinergic? Can you take a guess? Because they use acetylcholine. So it uses ACH at the organ. And because it uses choline, sometimes you'll hear people call it the cholinergic system. So you can say parasympathetic, you can say cholinergic. You mean the same thing, just a different way to say it. The sympathetic system we call adrenergic. adrenergic. From adrenaline, adrenaline is now called norepinephrine. So this is because it uses NE at the organ. It uses norepinephrine or adrenaline. So you'll hear people talk about your adrenergic response. They mean the sympathetic system. You're turning on adrenaline. If they say cholinergic response, they mean you're turning on your rest and digest. So depending on where you go to school, people sort of have a predisposition which one they pick. But adrenergic cholinergic is the same as saying parasympathetic sympathetic, which is the same as saying ACH or norepinephrine. Make sense? So on a test, you can give me either one. I know they're the same. Make sense? So they're talking about cholinergic neurons. They mean a parasympathetic neuron, because in the parasympathetic world. All right? Let's keep going.
Neurons that release norepinephrine into a synapse are classified as adrenergic. Norepinephrine is slowly inactivated by monoamine oxidase, MAO.
So that's just another way you can say it.
All preganglionic neurons in both the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions are cholinergic neurons and secrete acetylcholine. In addition, all the postganglionic neurons in the parasympathetic division are cholinergic. In the sympathetic division, cholinergic postganglionic neurons stimulate sweat glands.
And we're not going to pay attention to them.
Acetylcholine binds with specific receptors on the postsynaptic cell membrane. Nicotinic receptors, when activated, depolarize or excite a cell. On the other hand, muscarinic receptors, when activated, may excite a cell through depolarization, but can also hyperpolarize or inhibit a cell.
All right, there's another difference we have to start doing. So over here, for number 4, we have to start listing the receptor differences between these. So they differ in their receptors that they use. Because remember in 231, you have receptors and neurotransmitters. So in the cholinergic system, you have nicotinic receptors and you have muscarinic receptors. These are the receptors that pick up the acetylcholine. What did the nicotinic ones do? Let's see. Always what? Excite the cell, excite the organ. And you know that because nicotine is a stimulant, right? You smoke to get a buzz. You're going to excite the organ. So nicotinic receptors, when bound to ACH, will excite the target organ. Muscarinic tend to inhibit the organ. Right? So if you look at the sheet you just did, in the parasympathetic mode, some organs get turned on, some get turned off. You're releasing the same chemical, but they have different receptors on different organs. Right? So if I'm in parasympathetic mode, name an organ that gets excited when I'm in parasympathetic mode.
GI.
What was it?
GI tract.
Yeah, my GI tract. So my GI tract, I would expect to see nicotinic receptors. From rest and digesting, they turn on. What's an organ that turns off in parasympathetic mode?
Heart.
My heart will slow down, so you'd expect then you'd have muscarinic receptors to slow the heart down. So the reason some go on and off is because of what receptor they have, not the neurotransmitter. But remember that from Mouse Party from last term? If I change the receptor, I change what you do. So I'm changing the receptor, I get different responses. Now the hard one. There are receptors for the sympathetic mode. One is called an alpha receptor. Can you guess what the other one is? Beta receptors. And to make life difficult, they have 2 types. There's a 1 and a 2 for each one. In general, this varies, 1s excite in general. Does anyone know what a 2 does? It tends to inhibit. There's a little bit of fudge there. But I have alphas and betas are the receptors for adrenergic or norepinephrine, and 1s and 2s are another way to say it. So when your grandpa's on a beta 1 blocker, Now you understand what their doctor's talking about. Beta 1 means in the sympathetic system. Beta 1s would turn on my organ. Name an organ you turn on in the sympathetic system. Your heart. So if I'm blocking beta 1s, I want my heart to not get excited. This is the pharmacology you'll use in nursing every day, is figuring out what thing you want to turn on and off to make your body speed up or slow down. Right? So my dad's on a beta 1 blocker because they want to slow down his heart rate by turning off the sympathetic at his heart. Make sense? I can make your body do whatever I want by giving you the pill for which one of these receptors I want to. Right? So let's finish that up here. So that's an important concept in nursing school, is this idea of turning on and off receptors to make your organs speed up or slow down, which is what you learned in Mouse Party last term. Right? I should have.
Norepinephrine stimulates the postganglionic neurons of the sympathetic division connected to most effector cells. Depending on the effector, the adrenergic receptors on the postsynaptic cell membrane will be activated by norepinephrine to excite or inhibit the cell activity.
So they don't name them alphas and betas, but that's alphas and betas, 1s and 2s are those receptors. And depending on which one I pick, it speeds up or slow down. That's the logic of this.
The hypothalamus coordinates the activity of the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions of the ANS to ensure an efficient and balanced response. The sympathetic division dominates during a medical emergency, during exercise, when you are embarrassed, or when you react emotionally to a situation. Because of the type of stimuli, the sympathetic responses are known as the fight or flight, or alarm reaction. Sympathetic responses include pupil dilation, increased heart rate, force of contraction, and blood pressure, bronchodilation of airways and lung, vasoconstriction of vessels supplying blood to urinary, digestive, and reproductive organs,
And things I don't need in a fight.
vasodilation of vessels supplying skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles, and liver, increased blood glucose from liver and fatty acids, and glycerol from adipose cells. In general, sympathetic responses provide a rapid mechanism that increases nutrients and oxygen to support increased metabolism and activity in organs needed to resist stress. The effects of sympathetic stimulation last longer and are more widely spread than parasympathetic effects. There are 3 reasons for this. Motor pathways diverge to more effectors. Deactivation of norepinephrine is slower than deactivation of acetylcholine. And norepinephrine, secreted from the adrenal medulla during times of stress, increases and spreads the overall effect of norepinephrine that is released as a neurotransmitter.
Well, this trivia, adrenaline came from adrenal gland. That's how they got the name. So that's the logic behind it.
When a person is relaxed, well-fed, or sleepy, the parasympathetic division dominates. Because of this, the parasympathetic response is known as the rest and digest reaction. Parasympathetic responses, which oppose the support of physical activity, include decreased heart rate, force of contraction, and blood pressure, bronchoconstriction of airways in the lungs, vasodilation of vessels supplying blood to urinary, digestive, and reproductive organs, vasoconstriction of vessels supplying skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles, and liver. In addition, a group of parasympathetic responses known as SLUD include S. Salivation is increased. L. Lacrimation is increased. U. Urination is increased. D. Digestion and defecation are increased. In general, parasympathetic responses provide a rapid mechanism to promote the maintenance of normalcy, decreased energy consumption, and increased energy conservation.
Makes sense? Cool. All right, so we're going to practice this skill because next week's quiz is on the ANS. This is what your quiz will be on next week. So get your back of the pane. All right. Find page 13, the page after the big chart you just did, and you're going to memorize for me. We're listening together. All right. This woman has an adrenal medulla tumor. All right, so you don't have to know this, but the adrenal medulla makes epinephrine and looky here, norepinephrine. Where have you seen that before? Look right over here. Right. So if I have a tumor, what will happen to the level of those in your body if you have more cells in the adrenal medulla? It'll increase. Tumors cause an increase in secretion. So you'd expect those things to climb. I'm making more because I have more with which to make. Does that make sense? Okay. When do you normally release those? When do you do norepinephrine? Fight or flight, or sympathetic mode, or stress. Norepinephrine is released in a stress response, a sympathetic fight or flight response. So far so good? Receptors. What receptors are used in the sympathetic response? Alphas and betas. So alphas and betas are the names of the receptors. What specific responses of the receptors? Well, some excite you, some inhibit you, depending on the organ that's hearing the message. So some excite or inhibit. Depends on what organ is listening. My heart would speed up, my stomach would slow down, depending on what organ it is. Make sense? Okay, you have to tell me number 4. Is her heart going to be faster or slower when she has her medulla tumor? Faster, because sympathetic says I'm going to speed up my heart. Right? Stress mode. Make sense? Okay, number 5. Tell me about her blood pressure. Higher, because I'm fighting somebody off. Is she sweating? Yes, because that's what you do when you're stressed. You sweat more. Why is she nauseous? Digestion shuts down. So you eat something and then come to class, you feel just sitting there, because you're not going to eat when you're stressed. Right? Very well. Okay, tell me about her pupils. What will they do? They're going to dilate. Sympathetic, I get wide with fright. But sympathetic to dilate when the catecholamines are peaked out. Make sense? You're going to help me with the last one now. We want to give her medication that will lower her blood pressure. So over here, tell me what I'm going to do to my magic pharmacology here to lower her blood pressure. Which camp do I want to be in? I could be in sympathetic. Do I want more or less sympathetic? I want less sympathetic. So I'm going to block these receptors so her heart and her blood pressure would go down. So I'm going to use an adrenergic antagonist. Let's learn some language. That thou shalt know to pass your clinicals, thou shalt. All right. You learned these actually, I think, last term as well. Antagonist means to block, or to stop, or to reduce. You antagonize someone, you go against them. So I can give her an antagonist, a blocker. Okay? I can also give her an agonist. When you're in agony, you have pain along with it. It's to increase. So agonists do the same, antagonist block. Okay? So do I want to block or do the same as sympathetic? I want to stop or block per adrenergic receptor. So I'm doing adrenergic or sympathetic antagonist. That makes sense? So your doctor will either say blocker, antagonist, they pick a word, but they mean to stop that. Right? If I will prescribe an agonist, I want the same as that. So what would your blood pressure do if I gave you a sympathetic agonist? What would it do? It'd go more. I'd get more sympathetic. So the doctors can give you stoppers or goers for any one of those choices over there. Right? So if you have low blood pressure, I'm going to speed you up. If you have high blood pressure, I'm going to shut you down. Make sense? All right, that's why you have to understand these words at your work. Some other words you can choose to use, if you wish. A synonym for agonist you will see sometimes is mimetic. So if I say sympathomimetic drug, I mean I want the same as a sympathetic system. If I say parasympathomimetic, I mean I want the same as parasympathetic. You'll also see lytic for antagonist. A sympatholytic drug turns off your sympathetic system. So depending on who you work for, they'll do the $100 words, lytic and mimetics. They'll do the $20 words, blocker and goer. They'll give you the in-between words of antagonist and agonist. But in your career, these words will come up every day as a doctor prescribes a something to one of those. Right? So you told me I'm going to block or turn off or antagonize or lytic the sympathetic system. Cool. Is there another choice for her medication? So yes. What else could possibly lower her blood pressure besides turning off the sympathetic? I could increase her rest and digest. So I would prescribe her a cholinergic agonist or a parasympathomimetic drug. It's like a seesaw. I can do to one side or I can do to the other side. Right? Turn off the sympathetic more, turn on the parasympathetic, turn off the sympathetic or turn on the parasympathetic. Those would both lower her blood pressure. Make sense? The doctor gets to pick which one he wants. Right? So a nicotinic agonist would increase the excitation of the parasympathetic system. Make sense? So that's what you're going to have to kind of in your head formulate that there's two choices for each of those things. And therefore I can get your body to do whatever I choose by turning on and off the right receptor on the organ of choice. Make sense? Remember Mouse Party, the drug addiction? It's the same kind of concept. I'm changing receptors to change your body. So what you're supposed to know for your quiz next week, know the organs, how they're affected, know the pathway, which neurotransmitters, the length, all that stuff. Your quiz on the ANS next week. Make sense? Questions on the ANS? Yes?
When are we going to learn about the eyeballs?
Next week.
Okay.
Next week we do eyeballs, earballs, tasting, and spelling, and equilibrium. And then also about your test. Questions? Have a nice night.